Welcome to the 7th Art, live backstage at the Genies, or potentially after the fact, if it's not a disaster, on the 7thart.org. We're extremely excited to be given this opportunity, and we're going to use it as a platform to make a very special announcement. I don't know if I should do it now. I'm feeling like maybe I should. So, how do I put it? Hi.
Supposed to come in here? Getting
For-
interviewed? I'm an expert.
Oh, the Genie's Expert, of course.
Expert. I'm a Genie Expert.
So sorry about that. Sorry about the delay. We'll do the announcement later.
Hi, America.
We have this Genie's Expert.
Yeah.
Who's going to regale us with some Genie's trivia.
Rex Truxton.
Rex Truxton.
Thank you.
Rex Truxton.
Glad to be here
Do you have a Twitter handle?
at rextruxton.ca.
Okay.
So I'm a Twitter guy. I'm Genie's guy. You got any? You excited about asking me some questions?
Yeah. Because the Genies there's something that maybe people don't know as much about,
Absolutely.
but they do have a rich history.
Very rich because of Canada's rich natural resources. It's comparable. It's one of the natural resources.
Oh, really? Like in the GDP, it has a.
I've always had issues with the Genies ever since the 1931 Genies, when Hattie McDaniel wasn't even allowed to attend the Genies when Gone with the Wind was nominated. So that's
Gone with the Wind.
It's always come out of a place of resentment, my expertise on the Genies.
But Gone with the Wind, that's an American film, right?
The Genies, it was nominated as
Oh.
probably finest picture.
Oh, okay. There was probably like a loophole or something. Like maybe someone in it was Canadian. And
It's unclear a lot of the details about back then, but I do know that Hattie McDaniel was not allowed into the Genies. And I just sort of came on here as part of reparations for that. So thank you for letting me do that.
Sure. So tell me again. Why is it unclear?
But this year we made it a little better because the Help, Vala Davis,
Yes.
won for the Help
She won
tonight.
Yes.
Did you interview her yet?
No, that was. I didn't. Catch,
She's great.
She.
I
is,
thought
she
it
is.
started so well, her career on that show Rock. And when they did some of those Rock Live episodes, and she won some Genies for that too,
live.
if you recall.
Live TV.
Yeah,
But that would be the Geminis. I know people sometimes get the two confused. But
she got Genieized.
oh, Genieized.
Yeah, that's when you win a Genie.
You get Genieized.
She won a Genie for Rock Live.
What year did that enter?
Voila
into-
Davis. That's what I call her. Voila.
Great. I love the fox.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
One thing that I was always interested in when I was reading up about Edmund Boyd, it's opening May 11th, is to what degree you are in dialogue with gangster films as a whole, like generically, I guess I would say.
Quite a bit. Scorsese is a huge influence, for sure. But John Cassavetes was actually a major influence.
Oh, in what way?
In the realism and the naturalism of performance and shooting style.
Shooting style. So
Yeah, so a lot of handheld, a lot of all natural light. It was a key factor
yes.
in the film. So in those areas.
Was there a connection maybe to Killing of a Chinese Bookie or things that are more generically similar?
Shadows.
Shadows. Okay.
Shadows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is more of a kind of jazzy.
Yeah, jazzy, exactly.
Sure.
It was a huge influence. Yeah.
There's a strong personality to the characters in it, which is again part of the genre. But I'm wondering to what degree that also is something that is generic or to the specific story that you're telling.
Yeah, well, we both wanted to tell a character-driven gangster story. For us, first and foremost, the characters were most important because they were real characters. And we felt an obligation to be truthful to these real people. So character-driven was first and foremost the driving force. And I had the good fortune of getting to know Eddie Boyd and his daughter Carolyn and Doreen. And Allison got to know Carolyn. So we had that additional, personal responsibility to tell a truthful, character-driven story. So that was
Yeah, one of the highlights for us was films in the past, anyways, is Dog Day Afternoon, because again, it's true story. A man who did unbelievable, audacious things. He shouldn't have done them, but you felt so much sympathy and understanding towards him with every wrong move that he was making, every wrong decision. You just cared about him still. So that was the starting place for us on the story level, and what we want to achieve, what we hope to achieve, is that even though you don't, you wish that Eddie Boyd was staying with his family, and you wish that he wouldn't walk off the bus, and start robbing banks, you kind of understand, you hopefully understand why he's doing what he's doing, right or wrong, but you hopefully, feel compassion for him. That was our goal, anyway.
Is it a weight on your shoulders, though, the fact that these are real people still living, to represent that? Or is it something that you want to kind of play with a little bit, recognize that this is a film version, that it's not reality?
Yeah. A weight, probably we didn't feel it as a weight, I think. We felt it as not as a weight, but as a responsibility.
Yeah.
I think, just like we feel responsible for family members. This was kind of like an extended family, but a family that we spent a lot of time with, because we spent a lot of time with, not only with the real characters, but with the story. So it was, but we could rely on it too, knowing that so much of it was true and poetically true, that we could rely on that, and that gave us a lot of freedom, and made us feel quite liberated.
And we showed it to Carolyn just before the premiere. We showed it to her privately, and she was so moved by it, and she gave us her blessing on it. And we felt, honestly, I think, completely
That was the most
liberated, and it
important,
didn't
yeah.
matter what the critics said after that. I mean, it matters, but what was most important to us was that Carolyn felt that it
Her
was
blessing, yeah.
accurate emotionally to her experience. So, yeah.
Has a lot of the reaction been kind of focused on to what degree it is true or not? Like, it seems like films such as this, that it is a common reception.
Yeah, well, I think people always ask the question, how much is true? And what we had going for us was all of the extraordinary, outrageous moments in the story are true. So everything else, which was also true, so much, just passed by. But the outrageous things, the 2 escapes from prison, the Lenny's wooden foot, the hacksaw hidden in his wooden foot, all true. Eddie's aspiration to be a Hollywood actor, all true. So all these really outrageous things. That was actually the challenging part in terms of when it came to finalizing the script, was how to combine all of these incredible things that occurred, like 2 jail escapes. Eddie in real life actually robbed over 30 banks. We photographed 5, but he did 30. So his story is quite outrageous. And that gave us a lot of freedom too, actually.
You mentioned as well kind of wanting to recognize the parts you don't agree with, maybe some actions that the characters have conducted themselves. Was that difficult to reconcile in telling the story? I mean, it seems like it's something that's been a problem with films such as Carlos, to not want to overly glorify certain actions, but be sympathetic in others. How was that in both the performance and the writing and directing?
Well, certainly, the Boyd gang did something so terrible, right? They killed a police officer, and that was obviously very important for us and how we were going to show it, how Nathan chose to show it, and so.
Well, for us, it felt as a tragedy because it was misinformation. They didn't shoot a police officer when robbing a bank. They never hurt anybody, which is why they were so popular. They were like Robin Hood characters, and working class embraced them. They killed someone because they thought they were avenging a very brutal crime. So I saw it as a tragedy. These 2 young guys who go out and avenge an alleged crime and then are hung back to back for it. I wanted to have compassion for them, show it as a huge error, but have compassion for their choice. And also then show the tragic consequences of that too. So a gun only goes off once in this film. Like, they only fire their gun once at somebody. And we didn't want to stylize the killing. In a lot of gangster genre, violence is stylized for me, and killing people is stylized. So because this was a real story, we felt a real obligation to show violence as real as possible. So when they kill someone, we wanted the audience to feel like, oh no, like, I can't believe they've gone down that path. Feeling very sorry for them. At the same time, seeing quite clearly they really screwed up. And also then seeing the tragic consequence of that, and that's why we had, the police officer's wife in the background screaming, because he had a family, and so it wasn't cool to kill. That was really important.
And this is something that Cassavetes' naturalism will kind of convey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
One thing that made me think about was the Hollywood aspirations, which seem so common to films that deal with this kind of subject matter. So there's always this kind of meta level, because the gangsters are always kind of performing themselves in a way, and then to eventually have the film seems like the natural conclusion of any gang, really.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that you considered, especially because the Hollywood aspirations were a part of the story itself?
Yeah, well, I found it, beautifully ironic that a film that we had the good fortune of making the film, and that Eddie's life ultimately is fulfilled by this film. I think it's interesting that it never happened in his lifetime, because, he and I discussed this, and he was always skeptical whether or not a film would be made of him, because it's kind of like it was always his biggest aspiration. So I think the fact that it came after his death is also perhaps deserving, because of the choices he made in his life. But I think what was important for us too, and I hope I'm answering the question clearly, is that he was inspired by film, right? James Cagney was his hero. And the gangster genre was an inspiration for him, as it was for us. But the fact that it's a true story, and then now a film is made about it, it's just kind of so meta that, and that's our age.
Yeah.
That it's interesting. I don't know what's next. Maybe this interview.
Well, maybe this, is the film, for better or worse, that is something people look to the way Cagney was looked to. It seems like something that's always perpetually out of the control of the filmmakers, because those gangster films were not ever intended to be, the Cagney ones, to be, I guess, something that is considered cool. Mm-hmm. They had to end in a way that you clearly saw the downfall.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay.
Well, it was really great talking to you.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no, thank you.
With short subjects, it's always interesting to me, because it seems like awards are more important to short subjects, because there's an exhibition circuit that doesn't typically reward short subjects. So what kind of results do you see from this typically? Or do you anticipate to see, because the award is great, but it's also that much more important, I have to imagine.
Well, we won Genie a few years ago for a feature-length film, and it's funny, you kind of poo-poo these things when you're not in the running and when you lose, but when you do win, it only helps your business, it only helps your filmmakers, it only helps your next films. So I think it's important for that. It's Canadian cinema, and of course our shorts are now available online, so it's not going to help us theatrically. It's not like the Oscars or the Grammys where you get a big boost in box office, but it does help with the next projects, which I
can also
great.
imagine it's something that will draw people even online, though. It's
Yes,
something that, especially
absolutely.
for short subjects, you have to consider as being an even more important platform.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think one of our goals with this project in the very beginning was to have as broad a reach as possible. It was a very quintessential Canadian project. It was about Canada's national parks, celebrating the 100th anniversary of the National Park Service in Canada. So, from the very, very beginning, it was foolish of us to want to share this with everyone in Canada and make it as accessible as possible. And, the films have been online for, almost a year now. Yeah. Which might have hindered our festival chances or anything else, but I'm hoping this will draw more attention to it and perhaps more people will get to see these amazing films and sort of virtually visit these amazing places that we got to go to.
One of the nice things is that the films are online, so hopefully if there's even a bit of media coverage, we won't get the headlines, but if someone reads the name Sermalik and National Parks Project, maybe they Google it, maybe they end up on the website, and people who wouldn't otherwise have found the project end up finding it. So it's exposure, and it's a question of people seeing the film, and that's really nice to know that this might result in more people who wouldn't otherwise ever see the film finding it,
Plus the other 12 films that go along with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I asked that question was because it had such a unique distribution model to begin with. It was, with the kind of live dates that occurred. Was that something that kind of spoke to the actual subject matter, the way it was released initially?
Like a little bit. I think getting to do the live concert events that we did for the National Parks Project was, a pipe dream. It was a far off goal from the very beginning. It's like, well, we've got these 39 amazing musicians that have taken part in this project and recorded this incredible music. How amazing would it be to be able to get them together and perform? And as it worked out, we got to do a handful of concerts last year. One date like on the 100th anniversary of Parks Canada, and Canada didn't play Canada Day in Ottawa and Hugo Cinema in Montreal. So it was really great. And I think those kind of events all kind of factor into the general effort in getting this project out there, and not just the 13 films, but all the amazing music that everyone recorded as well.
It was very much cross-platform, and it did have this unique distribution strategy, and with so much of it being online that it did win the award, seems to kind of validate that you can have this ambition, that you don't need to play by certain rules.
I think things are changing, and everyone sort of knows that, and no one really knows exactly how. But I think that you'll see that more and more in the coming years. That you won't, there's been this division between online and theatrical, and sort of a class system almost. And I think that's disappearing. Things are going to go online. The theatrical experience is changing very much so, and who knows how long sort of traditional cinemas will exist. And certainly for something like short documentary, that's not really an option to begin with. So I think it's really a question of filmmakers trying to find ways to get their films out there. And I think that, although the industry is very hesitant typically to let go of traditional models, you'll see more and more of that because they'll have to. Particularly, the iPad 3 just came out. People
It's
are going
actually
to
called a new iPad.
Well,
They're not putting numbers on it.
It's the third iPad the third. But people are accessing films in much different ways. Films are like lengths are getting all kind of thrown into confusion. No one knows what's supposed to be what anymore, lengthwise or what. You make a short, maybe it's 20 minutes. Where does that go? It goes online, and all these boundaries are disappearing. And I think it'll be really interesting to see over the next little while how things like the Genies and other industry kind of industry standards adjust and adapt.
That's great. Thanks so much. Sorry I had to be so short.
No, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right.
So I think the thing about the Whistleblower that interests me the most, and generally films with stories that are similar to this, is how the audience reacts to what they believe to be real and what they believe to be like your own elaboration or, exaggeration. When you're making a film like this, how much of that plays into it? Like what you can say, what you can't say?
Well, for us, actually, the challenge was the complete reverse, because we totally toned down what happened in real life. I mean, the idea, for example, that these girls were relegated out into mountains was completely untrue the second she stepped off the plane. I mean, these girls were everywhere. Men sometimes that owned women would be walking around with them in the UN headquarters. Madeline Reese, who Vanessa Redgrave plays, said the local coffee shop had a girl upstairs. I mean, it was much more prevalent, and in a way, if you started that way, it would be so unbelievable. I think at the very beginning when the film came out, some people were questioning how much of this was true, but then we got so much press, and Kathy was so vocal, and so much of it has been in courts that it became quite clear then that it really the challenge for us was how to keep people engaged and not put them off because of how horrific it is.
It also kind of reminded me of old-fashioned horror films, though, in the sense of what you don't show,
Yeah.
like kind of what's off screen.
Well, I think that's when, when you do have something that's so horrific, I wanted to spend the time in that scene or in some of those scenes, because otherwise you can, chop and torture porn it. But if to really understand what it takes to be so violent to a young girl, I think that's something that people compartmentalize sex trafficking as something that's sort of part of a thriller or part of one of these shows. And I think the point for me of making the film was to show just exactly how horrific it is.
Was there a formal realism that you were going for as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh no, absolutely. I mean, I think that when you tell a story like that, and it was about embracing kind of the ugliness of the post-war situation, and yeah, I mean, absolutely. You look at films like Bloody Sunday or even Dog Day Afternoon. I mean, you wanted the experience to be as real as possible. I think if you create too much of a distance in between, you're sitting in a movie then, which works for most movies,
And it's really strongly rooted in the location that it's in, which is something that's personal to you as well.
Well, I'm Ukrainian, so yes, it was something that I wanted to do and to do well. So it was nice to go back to Eastern Europe, and I think the actors there were phenomenal, and I think there's a real kind of I think a collective unity both between the crew, between the locations, between the cast, and everybody was there for the same reason, which was to make something pretty powerful.
When you're photographing something like that, what goes into it, like that location?
When you photograph a location?
No, specifically your own association and then the strong relationship between the story and its
Well, we
political-
shot in Romania. The
Yeah.
story took place in Bosnia.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, every Eastern European country, Romania has its own problem. It's often a source for these girls. So I think that in an interesting way, a lot of the actors were aware of this in a way that we aren't over here.
Yeah.
And that definitely lends itself to the work.
And in the West, I guess what I was trying to get across was that we conflate the East. So the fact that you did shoot in a different location.
Oh, sure, yeah. Well, no, you had to. You had to.
It's kind of unfortunate, though. I mean, in some ways, your film reminded me of the Dardenne brothers, Lorna's.
Lorna Silence, yeah. No, I mean, that's a tremendous compliment. They're
But
absolutely fantastic.
But it's in a different location to some extent, right? And the fact that this kind of speaks to kind of it's common. It's frighteningly common, I guess.
Yes, it is. Yeah, especially in Eastern Europe. So yeah, because of the porous borders, I think, in Europe, and it's very easy to move people around, and governments sort of don't want to deal with it individually because then they have to acknowledge a sex trafficking problem, and it's much easier to just sort of get a girl out into another country. So you often had, like that happens in the film, where the police just drop her off in the border in Serbia, and now she's no longer a sex trafficking victim in Bosnia. They've gotten rid of one. They've helped one.
Do you think the UN reaction would have been different if it was, say, a documentary?
Well, we managed to get, after much press and after much pushing, we did manage to get a UN screening. I sat on a panel with the Secretary General, who spoke very much about the importance of a single voice. But then when I challenged him, and I said, well, okay, so you're showing this film, you're acknowledging this film, but to this day, you're still claiming that Kathy was fired for timesheet violations. So we're still waiting for a formal apology, even though we got a thanks for arriving.
You were mentioned on social media or something like that? Like that's the extent that they're interested in acknowledging it?
No, I mean, they held a formal screening in the UN headquarters,
Yeah.
and the Secretary General was there, along with a lot of top-level officials. So they acknowledged the film, they acknowledged that it happened, but there's still not a formal. Catherine Bolkovac spoke out against. I mean, he wrote it in a letter to me. We'd
Yeah.
like it to be sort of noted in history and to have an apology to the girls. So we're pushing for that still.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you.
All right.